Over the next couple of months, 9 on Your Side, we'll be looking at where we are 1 year into the pandemic. We'll be profiling the state of life, how things have changed, and what changes may come.
People in farming are still trying to make business work with low margins and high input costs. The coronavirus is adding to these existing struggles.
WNCT's Ariana Kraft shares one farmer's personal experience with COVID-19.
The foundation of Eastern North Carolina is built on farming and agriculture, and we've seen the toll COVID-19 has taken on the industry. But farmers are still planting seeds in the ground. I wanted to find out what the future of farming holds as we continue to fight through the pandemic.
I'm a third-generation farmer.
Larry Boyd has never worked another job in his life. Not even COVID changed that.
We farm about 6,500 acres of row crops, corn and soybeans, wheat and oats.
But the coronavirus did change the way other people live life.
I heard people saying in the middle of 2020, they can't wait for this year to be over. Well, I didn't say that. But come back December, I said, I am so tired of 2020. I'm looking forward to 2021.
But the start of the new year was harder than Larry expected.
On New Year's Eve 2021, I was diagnosed with the COVID.
Larry and his wife both fought and recovered from COVID, and life on the farm kept going.
Our main thing is we like to survive.
For some people, the pandemic made it feel like the world stopped. But not for Larry.
Really, the actual day-to-day operations on my farm is not really changed that much.
But business around him and his farm was much different.
They're surrounding industries and supporting industries that service the farmers. Those were the ones that probably saw more restrictions.
There's lots of secondary effects, as we all know.
Farming didn't stop then, and it won't stop now. Larry says the state of farming is in good standing and shares what has had a bigger impact on the industry than COVID.
The technology is the new way of farming. Now, 1.5% of the people do what used to take over 50% to do. With technology, that number is going to keep getting smaller.
The pandemic still built barriers.
A normal year, you would not be doing this interview with me today. Because today, I'd be in Louisville, Kentucky at the National Farm Machinery Show. But that's one of the many shows that's been called off.
Now meetings, educational events have all turned virtual.
It's not the same as a personal face-to-face meeting, which we love to do because there's a lot of interaction that goes on between the farmers.
COVID still is a threat to farmers, so they follow guidelines like everyone else.
Well, we do try to social distance as much as possible. We've tried to cut down our travel. Don't be out in public any more than necessary.
As the world keeps navigating through the pandemic, Larry Boyd is hopeful that people will realize where and who their food comes from, because that's one thing that will never change.
Every time you sit down to eat a meal, you need to remember to thank a farmer.
And while the future of farming is never certain, farmers tell me no matter what's going on in the world, farming is a livelihood. In Pinetown, Ariana Kraft, 9 on Your Side.
As part of our series of stories on different parts of Eastern North Carolina a year after the pandemic, 9 on Your Side is including a podcast for each story. Our Ariana Kraft breaks down her conversation with farmer Larry Boyd and his personal experience with the pandemic. To watch the full episode, just head to our website, WNCT.com. 9 on Your Side is taking a look at the impact of COVID and the state of parts of our everyday life since the pandemic started 1 year ago. The virus is still reshaping the economy, with businesses and government leaders working together to help shops, restaurants, and industries to survive. 9 on Your Side's Madison Forsey takes a closer look at the pandemic's challenges and lessons.
Lenoir County has seen a lot over the past decade, and just as businesses and restaurants are finishing repairs from Hurricane Florence, a new storm hit, the COVID-19 pandemic. So how are Lenoir and other counties in the east weathering this storm? Some people say it's too soon to tell.
This is definitely worse than the floods, I can tell you that. With the floods, you knew what was coming.
King's Restaurant is an institution in the East. This 9-decade barbecue mecca has seen a lot.
We closed and rebuilt twice after 2 different floods.
But no hurricane, no natural disaster could prepare it for the storm of COVID.
We literally almost closed the whole operation down I think like about the third Wednesday in March.
Joseph Hargett is the king of kings, but his domain has suffered from the pandemic. A third of Hargett's workers laid off and sales down almost 20%.
Everyone was worried, and so a lot of people still are worried.
So Hargett adapted, expanding the shipping business and adding curbside service.
I mean, we just worked hard. I mean, we came to work every day. We tried to stay positive. I mean, it was rough there for a while.
Not too far away, members of the Lenoir County Commission felt like Hargett, expecting the worst.
We were expecting taxes to be very low. We were expecting the property tax collection to be very much behind.
But a different reality surfaced in the age of COVID. 10 new businesses opened, unemployment numbers held steady.
I'm not downplaying how serious it's been and that it's been a bed of roses, because it hasn't, but I'm just so happy that our folks have all worked together.
Just across the county line, a similar tale.
We fared better than the rest of the country, and we fared better than the rest of the state.
Jeff Wood is Craven County's top economic developer. He believes Craven's variety of businesses is a bonus.
As one was hit, like for instance hospitality, particularly in a rough way, once our manufacturers were allowed to open back up, they've actually thrived and increased in their employment. So that diversity allowed us to balance out a little bit.
Wood also credits the lifeline Swiss Bear offered, a new loan program for downtown shops, a new version of Mumfest, and letting people eat in the street.
I got in touch with the city leadership and said, what do you think about on-street dining? Because our restaurants just were suffering so much, even more so than our regular businesses.
It worked. An October survey showed most businesses' sales were up 8 to 39%. Things are starting to look better in Joseph Hargett's kingdom, too.
I've noticed in the past, I would say past 3 weeks, the business has been on an uptick.
The ruler of all things Q is grateful to still be serving customers.
We've been blessed, and we've got through it. I think we're through it.
Lenoir and Craven County leaders say despite the challenges and uncertainty of COVID-19, they're proud of how their communities came together. In Kinston, Madison Forsey, 9 on your side.
9 on your side is taking a look at the pandemic's impact in the East and on everyday life over the last year. It's been a year since COVID put sports on hold, forcing massive changes for games, teams, organizations, and fans. 9 on your side's Kelsey O'Donnell looks at COVID sports impact and how we've adapt.
Growing up, sports can play a vital role in many kids' childhoods. It teaches lifelong lessons like overcoming obstacles and how to work together as a team. During the pandemic, the simple pleasures of playing, coaching, even watching the sports you love was ripped away.
March 11th, 2020, the day the sports world went dark.
We are monitoring many developments across the country and right here in the East.
None of us that are involved in it have ever really dealt with anything like it.
Just within the last half hour, all NCAA spring sports have been canceled.
All gatherings of 100 people or more be canceled.
The coronavirus pandemic has hit the sports world with full force today as leagues and tournaments were suspended and canceled.
This 67th annual ACC basketball tournament ends after just 2 rounds.
Well, it really was an unprecedented time.
It just didn't seem real.
Each person has a different story to tell, but each one shares the same feeling of disbelief. From youth programs to college athletes and fans, the pandemic placed a new hold on the world.
It's really difficult, to tell those student athletes that their season was done.
No sports to watch, no sports to play, just memories and an uncertain future.
The uncertainty of is this actually going to happen was hard, and that was a hard thing to manage with these guys.
That's when a new concern surfaced: the mental health of people connected to the world of sports.
From an emotional standpoint, a mental health standpoint, this past year has been really difficult for the student athletes, coaches, and our staff.
Leaving people asking, what do we do now?
The sports in high school are such an important outlet. And not to have the opportunity to see these guys every day in the fall was different for us.
Our kids, I think, really struggled emotionally between, say, about the first part of April and into May.
Throughout the past year, we have bonded together and worked through new obstacles. Coaches learning how to adapt and lead through the most challenging of times.
We had to always make sure we represented on the forefront the right example for these guys.
And there's a new sense of accomplishment tied to wins over a different opponent, COVID-19.
I'm proud of our student athletes and how they've responded.
The pandemic has taught us many things, but the most important one is that together we can do anything.
COVID-19 is still an altering factor for many athletes, coaches, and fans. But as we navigate through the pandemic, we learn to cope with the changes and work together as a team. In Pitt County, Kelsey O'Donnell, 9 on your side.
And with every one of our specials for the State of Series has its own podcast. Our Kelsey O'Donnell explains what she learned and goes in depth of how sports have been impacted in Eastern North Carolina. Listen to the episode now on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Not on Your Side is looking at where we are 1 year into the pandemic and how COVID is still changing aspects of everyday life. Teachers are still dealing with the effects of the pandemic, and it's changing how they teach. They've spent the past year learning new ways to teach students so that they can still learn at the highest level. Not on Your Side's Caroline Boyer shows how schools in the East have evolved since the pandemic.
COVID-19 has changed many aspects of our lives. Education is one of those. Teachers and school employees have been on the front lines of the pandemic since the very beginning. And even though these halls are empty, educators are working overtime to continue teaching their students.
No one has been used to this. No one expected it.
As a superintendent, you're often trained in crisis management, disaster preparation, but you're usually thinking hurricane. You're usually thinking snowfalls.
But Beaufort County educators have had a lot more than inclement weather to worry about.
It's just trying to make something positive out of a negative situation, and the best part of it is learning.
Samantha Gerganis teaches 3rd grade at John Cotton Taylor Elementary. It's been a year of reaching her kids through a computer screen. But Gerganis is still going above and beyond for her students.
If that kid was at daycare and they couldn't get on or learn the lesson, I was like, well, I'll see you at 7 o'clock, get on real quick, and I'd catch them up. And, I'm not getting paid for that.
She doesn't care about the money.
I just want them to know at the end of the day I care about them and I love them.
Principals in the county worry about how the pandemic will affect students' progress.
Some children that have been remote, that have not logged on for their live lessons, it's going to take a long time for them to get caught up, and I think we'll see the effects of this for years to come.
But Beaufort County teachers are up to the challenge.
And we can't just say, well, they're always going to be far behind, but what are we going to do to make sure they're not far behind?
Ashley Shiosaki is an art teacher a few counties over at Green Central High School. Her colorful classroom is much less vibrant these days.
It's a really difficult thing to try to figure out how to do something that's so personal when you're not even in the same space.
Art is a hands-on subject.
A lot of the materials that we use in art aren't things that translate to things that you can do at home.
As much as these teachers never expected to work through a pandemic, students didn't expect to graduate during one either.
It's kind of hard to get excited about the next chapter coming up when you haven't even been able to close this one out like you're supposed to.
Meredith Beeman is a senior at Green Central High School.
You feel like you miss out on a lot of those big milestones and a lot of those memories.
Beeman says virtual classes have been difficult both academically.
I've talked to a lot of people who, went from being A and B honor roll students to ultimately failing or having a really, really hard time.
And socially.
It's harder for me to hold a conversation because I've not been around people like I usually have.
COVID-19 revealed a lot of disparities in communities across the East.
We've provided hotspots to hundreds of kids to try to make those things possible, but in some of our rural areas, those don't even work.
13 students in our district do not have that broadband access or even access to technologies.
But educators agree good things came out of this pandemic, too.
I think relationships is number one.
Definitely relationships and support.
We've always been really tight, but we've really carried each other through this.
Educators are looking to the future.
I'm ready for the hallways to be full. I'm ready for basketball games and pep rallies and the things that make school a school.
But they recognize COVID has forever changed education.
Even post-pandemic, we're not coming back to what normal was, that we're going to use this as a way of being innovative and developing our practices.
These educators tell me they're looking forward to using the lessons they learned in 2020 to enhance education in the East. In Greene County, Caroline Boyer, 9 on your side.
And don't forget, every one of our specials for the State of series has its own podcast. Our Caroline Boyer explains what she learned and goes in depth of how schools have been impacted in Eastern North Carolina. Listen to the episode now at WNCT.com under the Features tab on the WNCT Podcast Network, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts.